Hey guys, welcome back to another Spy Family Sunday. Today I'm here to talk about Spy Family Chapter 114, which I honestly believe has been one of the best chapters we've had since we've hit the double digits in the hundreds. I really love this chapter. It was very emotional and very necessary. So yes, if you are new here to the channel, please consider subscribing, liking, dropping me a comment. So this chapter starts off with Yuri and Chloe. It's very cool to see Chloe again. We haven't seen her in a while. They're interrogating two extremists who have been causing them trouble around the city. Just two low-level, people that are like, oh, we're saving our country, they're defying the government. And so they don't believe in what the secret police are doing. And so after the interrogation, it's Yuri, Chloe, and I'm not sure what his direct boss's name is. I'm not sure if that's ever been stated, but he's the man that has the scar on his face. And so they're all walking and talking, and then the chief, guy that wears the glasses, he comes over and he's like, hey, you guys want to go out and get some steak, celebrate Yuri socking one to Twilight. Yuri's like, I'd love to, but I have a date. And Chloe's like, what? And then his other superior is like, it's most likely with his sister, which is sad that he would know him that well, and it also turns out to be true. And so he's meeting up with Yor. It's really cute. Yuri is just so excited to see her. He's like screaming as he's running up to her, and Yor's like, can you not shout in the middle of the street? And so they're basically meeting up to go shopping and have dinner. Yuri is thinking to himself, it's been a long time since I've actually been able to hang out with Yor, which is true. We have not seen them interact in a while, to be honest. And so they go to a department store and they're looking around at some of the fine china, and Yor's like, why is everything so expensive? It's like they've added an extra zero to the price tags on everything. And Yuri's like, hey, this is some high quality stuff. A lot of people that I work with shop here. And so they're looking around, and Yor sees like this really odd bunny statue. It's really creepy. And I guess Yuri thinks that she's interested in it, and he's like, I'll take this. And Yor's like, no, you don't have to get that for me. It's fine. Yuri is like, God, is it really such a tyranny where you live? Does Lloyd not allow you to treat yourself to things? She tries explaining that that's definitely not the situation. And Yuri is just really adamant about her getting something for herself. And so she sees some bedding and she's like, this would be good to get for Anya because the ones that she has are worn out between her drooling and Bond scratching up the bed sheets. And for Yuri, he can't really comprehend why she would want something that basic. He even goes on to say that it's childish, and and she's like, well, I am getting it for Anya. The thing I like about Yor is that now that she is in this role as the wife, she's very practical. It's like she's gonna get things that she needs. Like Lloyd needs a toothbrush, Anya needs bed sheets. She's not a materialistic person, which I can appreciate. She's very selfless. It's about giving to other people, which I think Yuri understands on some level, but he just wants to dote on his sister, and that's just not who she is. And so, he gets a little bit frustrated, and he's like, let's just go and get dinner. So they're at the restaurant, and Yor's like, I'm not gonna have any alcohol. And Yuri's like, what? You can't even drink? Yor goes on to explain, every time I drink, me and Lloyd sort of get into it, which is true. Yor can be scary when she gets drunk, so I understand why she's cautious about it. Yuri sort of takes get into it as something crazy, and he's like, yeah, maybe you should never drink ever again. And so they continue, and Yuri is convinced that she's brainwashed and she's being held captive and she's not happy. And Yor goes on to explain caring for Anya is what really brings me joy. It reminds me of when you were little and I took care of you. Yuri goes on to sort of reject that idea, and he's like, don't compare me to that simpleton. Back then you did what you had to do, to make sure that I was happy. Yor goes on to say, it's the same thing. I treasure those days when it was just you and me and you were a boy and I was taking care of you. And she's like, it's because of those times that I work hard currently. And, she says that when you got your big city job and I was by myself, she was like, don't you realize how lonely I was at that time? Yuri is having some introspection, and, he's sort of just taking in her words. He's like, is that the reason you got married? Is it because you were lonely? She's like, that's not why. But now that I have Anya and Lloyd, and you've become such an accomplished man, for me, those feelings are just in the past now. Yuri doesn't like that at all. And he's like, I will become unimpressive, I will shrink myself, and then you can just take care of me. Like, he really wants his sister back. And so the waiter at the restaurant is constantly telling Yuri, like, hey, you need to be quiet. Like, because he's yelling. You know how Yuri is. He can't control his emotions, so he's always like belting out words. And so eventually they get kicked out of the restaurant. And so they're walking, and Yuri is looking up at the sky, and he's like, when we lived out in the country, like, we could see a lot more of the stars than we can see in the city. And he stops and he asks Yor if she's interested in moving back to Nielsberg, just the two of them. And Yor is sort of taken aback by this question, and she's looking about the city, and she's like, the city is wonderful, and there's still work that I have to do here. And we see this beautiful panel of Yor expressing this to Yuri, and like, it's awesome. And I love that she's talking about this because there's like a double meaning. It's like, does she mean that there's work to do as far as like just her, Lloyd, and Anya, or is she thinking specifically like, as an assassin, I still have work to do? Because if we're moving into a Yor arc, like, I'm gonna lose my mind. She's expressing all of this to her brother, and he's like, yeah, you're right, I have work that I have to do as well. And she's like, not that there isn't work to be done in Nielsberg, but they can't just stop their lives and go back to just it being the two of them. It's not possible. And Yuri sort of, laments on that. And he's like, it was ridiculous. I shouldn't have even mentioned it. And now that they're about to split apart, he hands her a gift, which I'm assuming are the bed sheets. It's shaped like the bed sheets. And he's like, I bought this for you while I was pretending to go to the bathroom. And Yor thanks him, and they just have this really sweet moment. And then they separate, and Yuri's walking by himself, and he sees this honey spice cakes like vendor. And he's like, oh, I used to eat those when, like, I was a child with Yor. And he buys 20 of them. And, the baker's like, oh, thank you so much. And we get this flashback of Yor and Yuri when they were much younger. And, Yuri was sort of throwing a tantrum. He's like, I want one of these cookies. And Yor's like, okay, but I can only afford to get one. And so she buys it for him. And then she's like, wait until we get home for you to eat it. And then we get this panel of Yuri coming home, and, the mood sort of changes, and you see his apartment. It's very small, just a bed, a couch, a TV. There's not much there. He sits the bag of cookies on his night table, and, he's thinking about his sister and the time that they spent together, and, how he grew up, and he's thinking to himself, like, why am I so lonely without my sister? And it's the first time we're getting some introspection on his part. It's outside of his bombastic views of, like, Yor being married to Lloyd. Like, this is the first time we're, like, hearing his inner thoughts. He's thinking to himself, is it because she specifically married Lloyd and has Anya? And he's like, no, that's not it. He's thinking, like, it's because Yuri cannot express himself fully to Yor. He can't tell her what he does for a living. There's a lot of details about his life that he is not able to share with her. And it's crazy because it's the same thing with Yor being an assassin, although she's moving away from that. The big difference is that Yor has people to come home to. Like, she has Lloyd, she has Anya, she has something to take care of, something to look forward to when she comes home, whereas Yuri is just alone. He comes home and his apartment is empty, and then he doesn't have his sister either. And so I just found that incredibly sad. And then he gets a phone call from his superior, and he's like, hey, come down to the bar, like, we miss you, Chloe misses you. And she's like, no, I don't, like, come out and have fun. And Yuri sort of thinks about it for a moment, and then he agrees to go out. And that's the end of the chapter, but I really, really like this chapter, and I feel like it was a necessary chapter for Yuri and Yor. They were able to sort of talk about their anxieties. They were able to talk about things that they're looking forward to doing. They were able to push through the notion of, like, hey, why don't we go back to Nielsberg together, just the two of us? But by the end of their date, they've both come to the conclusion that yes, we have separate lives, but every now and then we can still reconnect. And even though it's not the outcome that Yuri wanted, like, he recognizes in himself that Yor has her own life. And even though he can't be a constant figure in that, I don't know, I feel like maybe Yuri might be at the point where he wants to expand his world a little bit. It's very obvious that Chloe has a crush on him. So I mean, maybe he could pursue a relationship with her. I don't think Yuri is actually in love with his sister. I think he's just lonely, and Yor has been the only person that has constantly been there, and he doesn't want to lose that. But it was a great chapter. I loved it. I don't know where Endo is going. It's been a little hard to predict lately. So if we are going into a Yor arc, I would be just over the moon for that, because I really do want to know the story of how she came to be an assassin. I want to see that backstory. So yeah, it was a great chapter. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, remember to be awesome and stay true.